Hello again, Pastor Ben Miller here from Bumpville Bible Church. In today's video we're going to be looking at the seventh plank in the Communist Manifesto. So let's get right into it. So Marx says, this, an extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. Now, on face value, that sounds okay, that sounds reasonable, but notice it's the state-owned factories and industries, and it's the state or the government that's going to decide what is done or come up with the common plan for agriculture. And we need to ask ourselves, is this good? Is this profitable? Does it align with biblical thinking? Does it align with our Constitution? These are questions we need to ask ourselves, and really the real question is ultimately this: should the government own the means of production? Which a lot of economists will tell you that really the difference between socialism and free market thinking is simply that socialism believes the government should own the means of production, while free market thinking says that no, individual people should own the instruments to production. And so which one really does bring about something that is better? Well, Marx obviously here is advocating for government control. And you notice Marx has the Communist Manifesto is a very thin book. But it is interesting, while Marx is just simply laying out the platform here of the party, he doesn't really give us a lot of why society is going to work better this way. And if anything he does give us is very vague, where a book that I don't have on me but I've been listening to on audiobooks is The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, which is a very thick book, in which Adam Smith goes into detail why some nations are wealthy and other nations are not. And he looks at the reasoning and he gives all kinds of examples. And he is a very heavy free market thinker. And he would say, opposite of Marx, that individuals should own the industry. It should be a free market thinking. But let's just take a look here at Scripture. Now, we talked about how Scripture certainly infers the right to have freedom of property, right? I mean, we've talked about that. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, and you should not use the government to do those things either. So I'm going to pick up a story that I've talked about earlier in some of our earlier videos, and that is the story of Naboth's vineyard in 1 Kings 21. I'm not going to retell the story, but just the first three verses I just want to look at here as we think about this. All right? So what we have here says, Now Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard in Jezreel, beside the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. So he has a vineyard. It is his, and it's next to the king's palace. And most likely this vineyard was a source of income for him. Okay? It was part of his business, or was his business. All right? And so we have this ongoing thing. It's next to the king's palace. And we have this verse 2. And after this, Ahab said to Naboth, Give me your vineyard that I may have it for a vegetable garden, because it is near my house, and I will give you a better vineyard for it. Or if it seems good to you, I will give you its value in money. Now, there is nothing actually wrong here with what King Ahab says. He says, look, I will buy the vineyard from you. It's a fair deal. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the king really isn't looking at this right now as something that he's trying to grab for state purpose. He just wants to buy it outright. But, verse 3, But Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers. So Naboth refused. And what does Ahab do? He ultimately, ends up using the government to seize the property and what? Redirect the land for what? A different use, which is a vegetable garden, doesn't he? And that's kind of what you actually have going in Marxism. You have saying the government is going to determine what is right. And if you don't like it, too bad, so sad, get out of the way. Now, there's a problem with this. Like I said, now first off, we see biblically that it really doesn't jive with Scripture, because we are responsible for the things that God has given us, including property, including land. But it also doesn't jive with the idea of free market, which I think is something that should really be looked into here. Because those are questions we have just in our own country about energy, right? Should we be transitioning from fossil fuels? And, if if renewable energy, as they call it, really is so much better, eventually the free market will allow it to develop to where it's not only able to compete, but where it is better than the fossil fuels. Okay, that will just naturally happen. You don't need government intervention to make that happen if it's truly better. And the free market, because the free market allows people to profit from their efforts, you know, people say, hey, I can make this work. If I can refine it and make it better, I can make more money. Boom. And that's free market principle. As opposed to the government saying, this is what's going to happen. Well, then where's the incentive to continue? If the government's already giving you money, where's the incentive to continue to invent, continue to push forward in this thinking, to even get real results? Because, you know, once you get a result, then the government money isn't there to continue to fund your research, so why? And so you have a lot of issues when the government comes in and tries to regulate things. Same with crop production, right? The government says, well, we want to be more friendly for the environment, so we don't want you to plant corn. We just want you to plant this worthless crop that you can't sell. We will pay you to do it, but we can't do anything with it. Well, what's that going to do to food supplies? Is it going to drive the cost of the food? Because you're now not planting a crop that is actually useful or that you can actually market. And so these are things that really become a problem in a Marxist ideology that, again, we very often overlook. And the other issue you have is, again, the amendments. And you know, I know I've mentioned some of these amendments several times, but they really do apply to these things. And as the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. That includes their land. That includes their farms. The government doesn't have the right. Now we could talk about regulations. How are they really just the government trying to do the same thing? We're not going to take time for that today, but I just really want to challenge you to think on these things. And I would certainly argue, and actually even to take the time to read Adam Smith and The Wealth of Nations. Take time to read that. It's just an excellent book on economics. So really, in answer to our question, no. It's best when the means of production are owned by the people. And even think about even think about the Constitution, right? We the people. You know, it would seem strange to me that the founders would start off with that statement. Why not say we the government, we the ruling elite? I don't really think they would come as we the people, we're just going to give our property to the government or who happens to be in power. I don't really think that's their attitude. So, with those things in mind, just some things to dwell upon, I'm Pastor Ben Miller. Till next time, live long and prosper.